Hello there. Welcome everyone to Real Guitar Live. This is our monthly live guitar question and answer session. Thanks for being here. Hi, Ami.
Hi, how's it going? Hey, everyone.
I see her on the screen right over there. And welcome everybody else. If you're watching this pre-recorded, feel free to put questions in the comments below, and I will still get back to you. I usually can get within a day or two at the most. If you have any questions today and you're here, great. Please enter them in the chat. And if you could start with the word question, because as we go down the list, sometimes there's a lot of comments, and that way we can see the questions for sure. We're less likely to miss it.
Yeah, we actually have some already coming in, so thank you guys. That's awesome. I love to see
that. Heck of questions. Oh, it just occurred to me. I need to see the pre-submitted. That's the right word, pre-submitted.
Yes.
I can still talk. So each month, people pre-submit questions, and we start with those. We'll start with the pre-submitted questions, for the most part. If we see a question there that's tied into something we're already answering, we'll kind of jump in and lump it together.
Yeah.
And then we'll start with the questions that you're asking after. So feel free to ask questions even while we're talking, because we'll go down the list and get to them. So the way this goes, for those of you who are new, I know most of you have been here, is each session we'll start with sometimes a presentation, sometimes not. Today I have something that I want to present to you. And then we'll go through and answer questions. When we're done, we're going to do a live raffle. And this is for people who are members of my Real Guitar Success membership. They complete 20 sessions. Each month they get a series of lessons, one per day, per weekday. And then those who have completed the 20 sessions, they're entered into a drawing. And just for fun, we give away an Amazon gift card, a $50 gift card. Now, the sessions, just to be clear, are, it only takes 10 minutes to actually check them off. And some of them could be longer. They're all part of a whole lesson series. If you'd like to know more about that, check realguitarsuccess.com. I talk more about it on that page, and you can always check it out, the membership for $1, and get a couple of weeks and see how it works for you. So let's start off with some of the pre-submitted questions. Oh, no, I'm going to do my presentation. I made this presentation based on some of the questions people were asking, and I thought this would be a good foundation to actually help me answer some of the pre-submitted questions as well. And what I want to talk about today is the whole issue of when guitarists are learning guitar, you learn all the first open chords. And I know myself, as well as a lot of my students have expressed over time, well, gee, kind of bored with these chords. I've been playing these open chords, and yeah, I can do quite a few songs and use these chords, but can we do anything to jazz them up or to make things more interesting? And there is actually a lot of different ways. You could add bass notes, you could put little lead riffs in between the chords, and one of the best ways, I think, is to start substituting some of the chords with a little fancier version. So what I want to present today is a technique that I love to use. It's changing regular open chords to something with a little more life. I call them suspended chords for the most part. And what that is a chord that has a slight change in the notes of the chord. I won't go into the theory too heavy right now. This is going to be a more practical lesson, what to play and what to substitute for. But it creates this kind of tension that when you relieve the tension by going to the regular chord, it creates movement and interest. So, for example, in the case of a D chord, let's start out with a nice D chord. So I'm going to go to my, so you can see my guitar. You guys see my guitar? We're going to do it so you can actually see the whole guitar, or most of the guitar anyway. There we go. How's that? So now I'm playing a D. I'm going to change this to a D sus4. That sounds big and fancy, but all I'm doing is put my pinky down on the 3rd fret. That's a D suspended 4. That's what sus stands for. And when I release it, it goes back to a D. You can hear it just by itself. How nice that resolves to. I'm going to change it to a D sus2. Again, one small change. Take up the second finger. Well, this lick is used so often in pop music. So let me give you some example. So that's a sound that you've probably heard many times. I'm creating that movement with a sus4 and a sus2. Let's go on to a similar version with an A chord, a regular A chord. A sus4, pinky down on the 3rd fret of the 2nd string. And back. Sus2, take the 3rd finger off. So I'm making my A with 3 fingers like this. I can still do this, by the way. I usually like to make an A with 2 fingers like this. I can still do it like that. And then what I do is I just lift up the 2nd finger and put it down on the 2nd fret of the 3rd string and then collapse back. That's actually the way I often play it, but I often teach students this because it's a little easier at first. You can do either or both. You can see that over time there is some value in being able to do both. So hear that in the chord progression. And again, it sounds normal. And that's what that sound is created by adding a sus2 and a sus4. Let's do it with the E chord. Again, it's very simple. Pinky down on the 2nd fret. And pinky up. You can do a sus2, I think. No, with sus2. I never do a sus2 with the E. Oh, that's a... No. We'll stick with just a sus4 for the E. That's the basic grooves of Pinball Wizard, and that's what Peter Townsend's doing. He's doing it with a bar chord, by the way. He's doing it, I think, up in here. Same sus chords. Just doing it as a bar. Forgot the last part. Okay, let's go on to this is one of my favorites, G. So we're going to do something a little different with the G. I'm going to change a couple of notes here. One word for this new chord is an A minor 7, that's the chord there, with a G in the bass. And I'm leaving the pinky up, so it's got actually a G in the high. But that doesn't change the chord. So it's got the G in the bass. It's almost like a C chord. So you could actually call it a C with a /G also, but we're going to just keep it simple, A minor 7 /G for now. And back to G. Oh, the opening to an Eagle song. So it's, again, I first learned it from a couple of Eagle songs use that. I think it's Tequila Sunrise. I can't remember the groove for Tequila Sunrise, but it does the same change. And I've noticed it's used in quite a few pop songs. Cat Stevens uses it. Father and Son by Cat Stevens, the intro. Next comes a C chord. What can you possibly do with that beautiful C chord? Well, one thing you can do is put the pinky down on the G note. It's still a C. I've just rearranged in this case, I made the G on the high note. And it sounds a little different. It creates a little movement. Another one I can do is put the pinky down on the 3rd fret of the 2nd string, and that makes it an add 9. And you can kind of combine the two. Okay, that's just to give you an example of some things that you can work with. Now, I'm going to stop there. I'm hoping that gives you, even if you don't learn them all, there's a few in there that really speak to you. And of course, over time, you might want to add some more. But this is really one of the easiest ways I know to actually get what I would call, some color into your very common open chords with actually very little effort. Just adding a pinky note here and there. And I just experimented over time and found different rhythms and different ways of playing it. And, of course, learned songs that use them, like the Cat Stevens thing and things like that. Okay, so let's stop there and see if we have more questions.
We sure do. We have some pre-submitted and we have some live ones.
Were there any questions about the presentation?
Let's see. If you guys have any, please throw them in. I don't see any right now, but I'll take another peek. Before we jump into those, I had a question.
Yes.
I just wanted to kind of clarify. I was noticing when you were switching in and out of some of those chords, you did a lot of hammer-ons and like pull-offs, and that really gave it a nice flair. So I wanted, for those of you, for anyone that's watching this, that's like just getting the basics and they're like, wait, how come when I do it doesn't sound like that? I just wanted to throw that out there. It's always like a nice flair to add on into what you're doing.
Hammer-on and pull-offs, that would be another way to add to chords. Of course, obviously, you can combine together. So suspended chords with hammer-ons and pull-offs. And she's talking about when I play the D chord, for example, I don't just play it like that. I often will play the chord and then put the note on. It's a hammer-on. And the pull-off is when you do the opposite. You hit the note and then pull off. Pull-offs, hammer-on. I do it without even thinking it, and like anything else, it gets to be a habit.
Yes, same here. And that's why I was like, let me just throw it out there for anyone that's like, how do they do that? So you know what, we're going to actually jump into some of the pre-submitted questions. We have lots of live questions, but the pre-submitted ones are closer to what you presented. So that way we can jump back into those. So one is from Juma. Juma says, if I am playing a song and I would like to add some sort of improvisation, a lick or something like that, what do I do? Do I take notes from the scale corresponding to the key or from the chord I'm supposed to play?
Well, let me start off, and I might get some input from you. That's a very general question, and it's hard for me to know exactly what you're asking. I think I could kind of guess, but I'm never sure. So feel free, if you're on the call, to add, some extra information, especially as we get talking. What I think of is when I say improvisation, I'm thinking of actually, usually I think of playing melody and just impromptu melody, live, soloing, jamming, that kind of thing. And I think what you're describing is more like creating embellishments on what you're already playing with chords, kind of like what I just did. And I hope that, if I were to pick one thing, I'd say what I just did would be a good example of how to add some color and some embellishments to the chords and things that you're already playing. It's one of the easier ways. That, along with hammer-ons and pull-offs, that with making some bass notes. Whether or not you take these bass notes or little interludes from the scale kind of depends on the style and where you're going to and where you're coming from.
Right.
So I can't think of one answer to say it comes from the chord or scale. Often when I do bass notes, they're coming from the scale at the key of the song. off right there. Those bass notes are all being drawn from the scale that I'm using. Basically, the song is in that key, and that's the scale. In this case, key of G is a scale of C. But that's not the way I would think. As a student, the way I would do that is to practice some simple progressions that use hammer-ons and that use bass lines and hammer-ons and get that sound in your ear. Don't try to figure it out intellectually. And some people like to do that. I mean, it's an adult tendency to try to think things out. Oh, what scale it's in? Let me think what notes. No, it's much more efficient to practice set patterns and exercises that use those things, get the patterns in your head, and then let the theory part, what scale, kind of come after and kind of supplement as you expand on that. It's a real rough way to go, to try to intellectually kind of muscle your way into figuring out what notes to play.
Yeah.
What
totally.
do you think, Abm-Eadd? Do you have anything you could add to that?
I've been there, and improvisation is not, well, I guess depending on the instrument that I play, it's not always my favorite thing to do. But what I think if you're like wanting to practice improvising, like practice coming up with a lick, it's not a terrible idea to start by just basically arpeggiating the chord, or basically just playing the notes of the chord over the chords that you're playing, right? So like, if you have the opportunity to use like a looper or even your phone to record yourself playing the chords or something else playing the chords, just practice kind of arpeggiating the chords and mix up the patterns. So instead of going like dun, 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 1, 3, 5, then you can like bum, 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 or bum, bum, right? And you can start there. Like that's a really elementary, solid place to start. But past that, you then would want to find notes outside of the chords that feel and sound good to you, and then start incorporating those. I think that's probably like when I very, very first started improvising, what I did. So it's a little bit of practice, but it's really quite a bit of feeling it and experimenting. And I think that honestly, I've noticed with adults, and we've talked about improvisation a lot in the past couple of months. Actually, it keeps coming up like every month. And what I keep coming back to is I think that especially adult learners, we kind of get into the space of like, but I want it to be right. And in order to really improvise, you're going to have to let that go. You just have to not care. You just got to let it go. Like trying to intellectualize it is not going to help. Like you literally sometimes just need to play a bunch of notes till you find something that fits and then write that down. Like, oh, okay, that note sounded really good there. Or, 4th fret, 2nd string sounded really good there. Right. And try approaching it from that way and let go of this idea of like, I want to play it right. I want it to sound right. Because you just kind of have to explore.
I remember I very much was kind of locked into, if I hit a wrong note, I'm bad. Something, I don't know what it was. I just felt like a failure. And I remember a turning point for me was I heard an interview with Emily Remler, a famous jazz improvisation. She was known for being very good. And she said she got good at improvising by just every day after her job, she had a job, she would come home and spend several hours. She'd just make a chord progression and then improvise over it and make a lot of mistakes and kept picking and choosing what she liked and trying to repeat what she liked, and let go of what she didn't like, and did that over and over for a long time. She didn't say, oh, I spent all my time studying what scales should go with what chords and all those things. And I'm sure she did know some of her theory, but that's not what I heard was really making the difference for her. And I took that and realized, that man, she had to make a lot of mistakes and just keep going. Yeah. And that really helped me. That really helped me push me over the edge. Just make mistakes, keep at it. Sometimes I'll record and listen back and say, oh, I kind of like that little part. Let me try and do that a few more times.
Yeah. And I'm telling you, I mean, this is coming from like a perfectionist. Yeah, y'all. I'm seriously a perfectionist just as a person. And so that's part of the reason why I actually shy away from improvising, because I don't like the emotional challenge of having to just let it go. That's hard for me. Like I want it to sound the way I hear it in my head. And sometimes it just don't sound that way. And so you have to get comfortable with the discomfort. And it will get easier over time. And, I think generally speaking, it's not like you're playing at Carnegie Hall to practice these things, right? Most of the time you're by yourself or it's just a friend or family member around. And You just kind of have to roll with it till you get there. That's a good question, though.
Excellent question.
Yeah.
Jauma. I learned to say his name, Jauma.
Jauma. Good. Very good. Okay. I am actually going to, we have some more pre-submitted, but I'm going to jump over to the chat. I'm going to flip-flop a bit here because we have lots of people with lots of questions. We'll start with Mark. Mark says, hello and good day. Hello and good day to you too, Mark. Why do some instructors on the internet in particular have their guitar amps with 1 or 2 microphones in front of an amp?
That's a good question.
That is a really
I don't think anybody's ever asked me that. But I do take that for granted. First of all, I'm not exactly sure why specifically guitar instructors have mics on their amps. It could be they're imitating something they do when they play live, and it could be because they're recording. Let me say there also is a certain sound created by miking your amp and then running it through your system, and you can add a little reverb and other things that you might like better than just the sound straight out of your amplifier. Amplifiers have reverb and everything, but you can do more if you're running it through a mic and through some processors on your computer usually. Now, in live situations, we are, as guitarists, when you're, especially electric guitar, you're playing, you get an amp, you like the sound of that amp, but it's not loud enough to actually compete with all the other instruments, so you mic it so it goes through the PA system. And now, not only is it louder, but it can be mixed appropriately by somebody else on the mixing board. So the amp on stage, you hear some of it, but the main purpose is for the audience. They're hearing what's coming out through the PA system more.
Right.
And often guitarists will want a smaller amp because they can get it up to a volume when they're practicing or playing by themselves that sounds good. It gets a little distortion and a tone that they like that you have to kind of get up to a certain volume. But then by miking it, you get the volume without having to worry about getting a bigger amp and playing really loud when you're practicing. So they want to use the same amp they're used to on stage, just make it louder for everybody to hear. Now, there's a whole science to miking the amp properly and getting a certain sound. And the mic actually becomes a part of the sound for a lot of people. I'm thinking of ZZ Top. There was, I read an interview one time, they would mic their amps and then record over that and over that to get this big fat sound, of several guitars. They add some reverb. They actually would put the amp and the mic in a cement room to get the sound vibrating off the walls.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. I think they said 9 times they would record the same guitar parts over and over and
whoa,
loop
that's a
and
lot of
layer
layers.
them.
Yeah. Woo. It's a big sound. Good question. So we have 2 questions here, but I'm going to put them together. One from Michael, one from Terry, because they're kind of on the same question. Why is the high E string on the acoustic guitar? It sounds like a tinny sound. I have a 9 E string. How would you improve the sound quality? Is it the strings or the guitar? And Terry kind of followed up by saying, I echo Michael's question. My first string sounds very tinny when I play specifically with 9s, and that's the gauge of the string for those of you that don't know. And can I avoid this by fitting a higher gauge E string? So how do you get the 10 out of that E?
So are we talking acoustic or electric guitar?
Acoustic.
Does it?
Yeah.
A 9 is a very light string on an acoustic guitar.
Yes.
I've never gone below 10 on the high. And even 10, I would consider extra light on acoustic guitar. That's really light. I have 10s on this. I like it. So that's one thing. You might want to move up to a thicker string. I've never seen a pack of strings that had 9 as a high string on an acoustic guitar.
No, like lights? String. Yeah, lights. No, I'm even saying extra, generally lights are 12s.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
That's the standard.
Medium are 13. Extra lights are 10s on the high end. 10. Now on electric guitar, 9s are common. That's a lot of people play with 10s on electric guitar, but 9s are common. And some people like to really, like rubber bands, they'll put 8s there. They bust easy. That's the other side of that. But electric guitar doesn't matter. You can bend really easy with less effort too. I've had several guitar players get carpal tunnel, and they would go to really light strings to help kind of therapy their hand, get back to normal.
Yeah.
So it could be your guitar too. It's not simple. Certainly, any strings on a cheap guitar tend to sound tinny to me. And that's part of what you get when you start getting more expensive guitars, and it's like anything else. You can spend unending amounts of money, and the improvement gets smaller and smaller as you get higher and higher. But it's part of the guitar playing journey. You go and you try out some different guitars and you see what they sound like. It's good to know what the options are available, but also what the variables are.
Yeah.
The type of string. The other thing is too, strings tend to sound bad as they get older, and you might want to try just a newer string. They get a little bit corroded, and sometimes you can't even see it, but it does create, it damages the tone.
Yeah.
Of the strings.
Yeah, and that would be my advice too. I mean, I don't play guitar, but I've like repaired guitars and restrung guitars and know a lot about strings and all that. So yeah, definitely go with a thicker string, because that 9 that's really light for an acoustic guitar. So it's gonna, and the type of string too.
I always thought I would never go below 12 on the high end, but I put 10s, they're extra lights on here, and what I found is I just need to hit softer. And it still sounds good. Yeah. So I smooth instead of digging in.
Yeah. I'm wondering if the type of string changes it too. I'm not sure how it affects those top 3 strings that are not wound, but like on my acoustic, I can definitely feel a difference between an 80-20 bronze and a phosphor bronze. But again, I'm not sure for those just straight up steel if it's not really different.
It won't make a difference.
Okay. Yeah. It's just for the wound strings.
Even among brands, these top strings are pretty much all the same. They come from the same factory. And because they don't have a winding, they don't have those other characteristics of a bronze or phosphor bronze or any of that.
Right. Okay, cool. Good. Well, that's good for me to know too. Okay. So Shulamit, I know just submitted a question, but Shulamit, I'm going to lump your live question in with some of your pre-submitted ones. I did want to go to Felicia's question real quick. Felicia says, is soreness, not pain, part of learning guitar?
I don't know anybody who has learned acoustic guitar who has not felt soreness.
Yeah. And I want to clarify too, Felicia, if you're still here, can you tell us where you're feeling sore? Because shoulder and elbow soreness is different than finger soreness.
And finger soreness, tips of the finger soreness is different than the rest of your finger and hands, muscle.
Yeah.
I think you have to work through a certain amount of soreness, but you also have to be wise about it and not try to do something that's either going to hurt you or make guitar playing so unpleasant that your brain starts saying, I don't like guitar. It's just painful. So you kind of balance that. You got to back off sometimes, lighten up your fingers. A lot of people get sore in their fingers because they press too hard on the strings. Try to ease off and see where you can still get a sound by getting a better position with your fingers rather than just pressing harder.
Right.
That will help you indefinitely because as you progress, it gets to be a habit to press too hard, and that will always wear out your hand as well as make it hard to change chords. When you put a lot of energy into one chord, you have to release it to get to the next chord. So you're halfway there if you can lighten up on the how hard you press.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if we hear more about where the pain is, maybe I could talk about that. Certainly shoulder pain and neck pain and back pain. I have a lot of experience with that, and I'd be glad to share more.
Yeah, Felicia, if you're here still, please go ahead and add into the chat some clarifications. We'll be glad to come back to you. We have another question from Ken. Ken says, what are the easiest chords and strumming styles for acoustic like funk and neo-soul?
I don't know that.
I don't think I do either.
Funk or neo-soul.
Yeah, but I would definitely do some searching on YouTube. I'm sure you can find somebody that like specializes in doing that. And I can just tell you, like, generally speaking, funk and neo-soul are going to have their roots in blues and gospel. So if you're a beginner, my recommendation would be to start with some basic blues understanding.
That makes sense.
Because
you can't go wrong with that.
You really can't. And neo-soul and funk are definitely like derived from those genres of music. So if you're starting from the beginning, go ahead and get some of that theory and understanding and some common progressions, some 1-4-5s. You're going to learn some chords and how to transpose those into different keys. And then basically neo-soul and funk are going to Actually, they're going to do some of the things that Thomas was talking about earlier with some of these chords. They're going to augment them and diminish them and do all kinds of funky stuff. But if you have a good solid foundation and understanding of those styles, it'll be easier to kind of transition into funk and neo soul. That would be
a
my
great
tip.
suggestion.
Yeah, thank you.
Blues is a good foundation for a lot of styles of music, and that makes sense. Funk and neo soul, as well as there's a lot of blues and jazz, rock, all that. Hendrix, Stevie Ray Vaughan, early Zeppelin. Gee, that was all.
It's all based on the blues. Definitely. And gospel's another one. Now, newer gospel is going to be closer to like the neo soul and funk side of things. That's where you're going to get some really crazy chord progressions. Listen, I love it. I think it's really cool. But if you're a beginner, it can feel overwhelming. If you go back to like some old school gospel, that's going to have its roots again in the blues. So that's why I say really, if you just start with some basic blues stuff and then do some YouTube searches, I guarantee you'll find someone that does like funk and neo soul. And just to be clear, you'd mentioned is for acoustic guitar. Even if the person teaching it is teaching on the electric, there are some differences, but generally speaking, when it comes to like learning the chords and strumming patterns, you can learn whether the teacher is teaching it on acoustic or electric. I just don't want you to search and like find only electric guitars and feel like you can't do it. Okay, so the next live question is from Rigo. Hi, Rigo. It says, hi, Thomas. I love your guys' way of teaching. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Can you tell us what are your steps in making your own song? What steps do you recommend, like for writing songs?
This is kind of a tag team, huh? We're back and forth. You take this one. Steps. I'm a composer, and I don't write words, so I might not. Some of this might apply to songs with words. Generally speaking, when I go to create a song or compose a song, I'm creating melodies and chords to start with, and then I'll expand on that. I'll blend them up a little bit or add harmonies and those decide on sections, and sometimes I'll spend months getting it just right. But to start with, I'll either create a melody, I'll often sing the melody, and then I'll try and play it on my guitar, and the two will kind of go back and forth until I get something that is more playable than what I was singing. Sometimes I'll sing something that doesn't quite work on the guitar, but it's usually a good start. And then, as a matter of fact, this is an exact procedure that I do almost every morning. I'll first of all play 10 minutes of make-up melodies and record them with Audacity, which is a free software recording program for the computer. Then I stop that, and for the next 10 minutes, make up chord progressions that I think would go with something like what I was just playing melody-wise. And they don't have to match. That's just my starting place. And then I'll go the last 10 minutes and start trying to put that melody and chords together, and I end up massaging both. I'll change the chords, change the melody to fit. And I'll usually end up in a half an hour with sort of a kernel of a song, kind of the chorus or the chorus and the verse. Not a complete song in 30 minutes, but, a kind of an essence of a song. And then I save that, and at some point I go back to those kernels, pick ones I like, see if they fit together, expand on them, elaborate, start making more sections. Sometimes I'll find something I really like and just spend the next week or two working on that one and kind of expand it out. I get excited thinking about it. It's fun for me. And I'm amazed at sometimes what comes out of it. Every time I sit down, I think, what the heck am I going to play today? I got nothing. And almost always I come out with something, even something small. It still amazes me. I don't know where it comes from. But sitting down is the best thing you can do and just making time for it. I've heard this from a lot of creative people. You just got to get over thinking, wait until I'm inspired, and then I'll do it. Just sit down. If you're creating music, make time and just sit down for half an hour and record whatever comes out and fool around. And then the next day, listen to what you did the day before, or wait for 3 or 4 days and listen to all 3 or 4 and see if you can elaborate on them. Now, with words, I think you can kind of do a similar process with words, but not being a songwriter, I couldn't talk from experience.
Yeah. And I have no input on this. Just I think I touched on this perfectionist thing earlier. Composing is not really my favorite thing to do. I've never felt confident or it's not fun for me. But I'm always really inspired by people who do enjoy doing it. So I think those are good tips. We're going to go back a little bit. Felicia responded about the pain. And Felicia was saying like discomfort and pain in the fingers, hands, and forearms. And they said, I have lightened my touch on the strings and the soreness seems to go away a bit.
Oh, good. That's great. It gets to be a habit. So that's the point is keep working on it until after a while, your fingers will just go to the right pressure without having to constantly think about it. But you have to work it for a while.
Yeah. And actually, I think one thing that I see a lot, and I have to correct it on ukulele, so I can imagine as a guitar teacher, you had to correct it for years and years, is when people are like holding, now obviously this is like a much smaller neck, but they get this kind of like arm craning thing going on, right? Where they're like trying to get in front of the strings, but here, let me turn this way. They're trying to like get in front of the strings a little bit, so they got this weird wrist thing going on.
It'll kill your wrist.
It'll kill your wrist, and you can feel that in your forearm because, I mean, all those muscles and tendons are all up in there, right? So I'm curious, Felicia, it's possible that you may want to just sort of reevaluate the way that you're holding your guitar. I think some finger pain is pretty normal, some hand discomfort. And if you're doing a lot of finger style exercises, some arm soreness would make sense to me too, forearm, just because you're using muscles that you don't normally use. But you may just want to reassess how you're doing it and maybe watch some videos or take a couple lessons on how to properly hold and handle your instrument just to double check that what you're doing is good. Yeah.
I often recommend students, in addition to all of that, to sometimes put lighter strings on their guitar and also to shorten their practice sessions, but do many of them and keep coming back at it. In muscles, if it's a muscle thing, it will adapt. If you're doing something wrong, that'll actually just multiply over time. So you want to keep checking. Check for muscle tension in shoulders and arms. Keep trying to relax especially your left hand. Relax it, put it on, just enough pressure to hold it up, but not to clamp on the guitar.
Yeah, exactly. We have another live question that says, why does my bass string sound muted on the second fret?
It could be your technique. It could be the guitar. It's not something I would know. But you could try a different guitar and see if it's the same thing. And if it is, it's your technique, the way you're playing. And that's probably putting your finger in the right place with the right amount of pressure, close to the fret as opposed to farther back. If I put my finger farther back, it tends to mute out the notes or buzz.
Yeah, that's a good point. Actually, Thomas, could you switch to the camera so we can see what you mean by further back?
Oh, there we go.
There we go.
So when I hit a bass note, my finger is close to the fret right here. If I go back, it either buzzes or deadens out or both. So if I lighten up my finger, it'll start deadening out. So I'm looking for that place where it sounds good, close to the fret, with the least amount of pressure, but it's nice and clear. Not enough pressure. Pain in my finger, too much pressure. Just there. That's what I'm looking for. And that's what I have students do, is kind of practice press little by little and see where it sounds clear and how much pressure it takes, and no more.
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you for showing. So I have one more live question that just came in from Tim, and then we're going to jump on to some more pre-submitted ones. Shulamit had a few for us this month. So Tim says, and hi Tim, by the way, I'm trying to learn some Pink Floyd songs with drop D, E string, Goodbye Blue Sky, or some are tuned down a half step. Is this messing up my ear training that I worked on with RGS lessons?
Oh, that's a good point. So are you tuning the whole guitar down a half step?
That's kind of what I'm gathering. And Tim, you can put in the chat to clarify.
I will say in general, no. I mean, I don't think so.
No, because a lot of ear training has to do with interval, right? So what you're really thinking about is the relationship between one note to the other when we're talking about ear training oftentimes. And although the name of the note may be different, the amount of space between the two notes is still the same. So I don't think it's going to affect your ear training.
It will affect when you go to play the bi-copy lessons. if your whole guitar is tuned down a half a step, you can still do it that way, but everything you have to play it up a half step more to get the in tune with what I'm playing.
Tim says some are half step, but mostly just the drop D. So like the E string is tuned.
Oh, to drop D.
Yeah.
No, I wouldn't worry about the ear training aspect of that. I don't think there's no problem. I would say tune it back up to E when you're doing the ear training exercise. It adds a complexity that you don't need when you're learning the bi-copy playing stuff.
Yeah, I agree.
But I go between E and D all the time. I really like D when I'm playing anything in the key of D.
Yeah.
I want that low bass note.
Okay, so let's jump back to some of our pre-submitted questions. I think we have a few from Shulamit here. So first one is, what do you do if you come across a song that has some weird chords that you've never seen before? For example, there's a song I want to play, and it has a B9 flat, maybe B flat 9, I'm not sure. But what on earth is that?
Okay, first of all, I don't think you mean weird chords. I think you mean cool chords.
Mm-hmm.
B, I asked Shulamit about this, and she sent me a copy of the music. I believe it's in Hebrew. She didn't say that, but I know she's in Israel, and it was characters, the language I couldn't read. Yep. But the chord was exactly written like that, B9 flat.
And the flat was little, like on the 9?
No, it was written like that. First of all, this brings up another issue. It's tablature on the web. Many tablature is wrong. Much tablature is wrong. I mean, in the sense that it's not accurate compared to the song. Yeah. So that I want to say right up front, because I didn't know that at first. I realized that people putting tablature on the web are a variety of skill levels, but they generally are not the top pros doing that. Top pros don't have time for it, for one thing, putting free tab on the web. But also, they're going to write it a little differently. They don't usually just write lyrics and chords like that.
Right.
They have software for writing music. So it's often people with less experience writing those tab. And when I go to learn a song on the web, in English, of course, I'll get 3 or 4 versions, and I'll listen to the song and see which one comes closest, and then often still make some changes because I realized the chords weren't quite right. I just did that recently. I was doing this. I can see clearly now that every version was different. And the issue is also, by the way, there are different versions of the song on recorded. So sometimes the recording artist will change the chords. In any case, that said, I believe that's a mistake, even though it is a different culture. My first thought is maybe they do it differently in Israel. But I looked on the web and I searched as much as, reasonable in 20 minutes, and I couldn't find anywhere anybody writing a chord like that. So I think, and it doesn't make sense because when you look at it, it hides the information of the chord when it's written like that. Right. I think it is meant to be B flat 9. You're not going to write B with a flat 9. That's not a real chord. You'd have to have some other notes in there. So you'd have to have something else to be like a B7 flat 9 would be a chord.
Yeah.
A cool chord.
Love it.
So that chord is B flat with a 9th added. It's what we call an extended chord. It's not weird. It's just, and I'm saying that to kind of hopefully put you at ease, it's just another form of B. You got a B. I'll show my guitar again. You've got a regular B. I can only do a bar or something like that for a B, but I'll often play a B7. That's basically a B with a 7th note added. I don't want to get into complex theory because we could talk for hours and it may not go anywhere. But just, there's Bs and B7s. It means that it's a B chord with a 7th note added, and there's some rules around, what to call it depending on which 7th. But B7 is a very common chord. Most people who've been playing for a while know that chord. And the B9 is the same thing as a B7 with another note added. This is a simple explanation because it's not quite that simple, but another note added called the 9th. Now, in the case of B, a 9th would be one step beyond that, B to C sharp. That's one full step. C would be a half step. C sharp. So it's a B7 with a C sharp added to it. That said, that's an intellectual approach. It's interesting. I think it's certainly worth studying up. If you know how triads are made already, don't jump into extended chords. Learn how triads are formed and feel somewhat comfortable with that. Then when you start extended chords, learn how a B with a seventh looks like in terms of theory.
Yeah.
More importantly, just learn the chord forms and then back into understanding how they actually work. The intellectual approach doesn't just naturally turn into good sounding music, but it is good as a supplement to hearing and playing chords. That said, here's how when I come across a cool chord that I don't know, I pull this out.
Whoa, look at that chord book.
Many musicians I know have this book or a version of it, a different brand. Yeah, and you just, I don't know B, in this case, B flat 9. Again, the chord is written wrong. Now I would look up here, find B's, B flat, find a B flat with a 9. It'll give me a dozen chord forms. I'll try out several. I'm going to pick one that's close with the other chords I'm playing and that is reasonably easy for me to finger. I'll try a few out and see which ones seem to sound right and feel like I could get. I'm not expecting to get it perfect first time around, then I'll practice it going from one chord to another. First I'll get the fingering and then I'll go from one chord to another and then I'll go from one chord to that chord and then to the next chord and keep practicing until I can do that. It may not be one sitting, but I'll do it for days until it just seems to come fairly natural. Then I'll add it into the song.
That's awesome.
I've got a new chord in my repertoire, and I'll do the same thing again when another cool chord comes up.
There you go. Love it. So Shilamit's next question is, when would someone want to use augmented or diminished chords in a song? And can you give an example of in which way they're used?
Both are very dissonant, and they're used to create. It's kind of like if I were cooking, I would use them sparingly, like I would use hot chili pepper or some very pungent spice. And in some cases, depending on the style, I would never use it. I use diminished chords. I've never created a song with an augmented chord that I can think of, but diminished chords are more common. I like that tension and release sound. So a diminished chord is see how it's tense and then it resolves to E. So here's an example of a diminished chord. This is the chord changes to it's that George Harrison song, My Sweet Lord. I got it wrong. I can't see from here. There. No, not B minor. B natural. So it's going from E to C sharp. Then it's going into a G diminished. There. And then goes to F sharp. And that G diminished is kind of like a bridge. It's changing keys actually, and it's going from the C sharp minor E in the key of E to this F sharp in the key of B. The tension and release when it goes to the F sharp I find it attractive. Of course, if you've heard that song, it sounds normal. Another one, this is very common for me anyway. Let me think. C major 7. So it's a C major 7. I'm bridging between the C major 7 and the D minor chord right there, with a diminished chord, to a D minor. And the reason it works is actually because the notes in the C sharp diminished, are closer to the D minor. So what I'm doing is the notes are easing up into the D minor, kind of providing little steps. It's a little hard to hear. Maybe I go slow. That's raising the notes up a little closer. It's like in between the D minor 7. And that's just continuing the chord progression in the key of C.
Yeah, I also just wanted to mention for Ken, who asked earlier about strumming styles like chords and stuff for funk and neo soul. That is a very neo soul progression that Thomas just played.
I didn't know that.
So there you have it.
I took it from jazz.
There you go. So it's a jazzy blues kind of thing. So I heard it and I was like, ooh, let me just let Ken know real quick. This would be a good spot to bookmark for your brain and play around with some of that. That's great. And so the next question from Shulamit is actually completely tied to somebody who was live that asked the question as well, either Stephen or Stefan. So what's the difference between a C9 chord and a C-Add-9 chord, and how do you know? And Stefan or Stephen's question was, why play a C-Add-9 for a C?
Yeah, let's go to my guitar. A C-Add-9 and a C9 are different. I'm going to talk theory, but I'm going to keep it light. A C9 chord is a C7 with a ninth note added. In the case of C, that would be, if you go all around one full octave, that's 8. So 9 is one more. That's why I say going from C to D, it's one step, but it's actually a 9. Because we think of it musically, it's going around the octave from C to D. So it's 8 plus one more, 9. So a C7 with a ninth note added. There are other rules. An example are, you could actually leave out the fifth of the chord, the fifth note in the chord, and it would still be fine. You need the third to decide if it's minor or major. So that's just an example. I don't want to go into all the rules of how you create chords right now. C-Add-9 is C chord with that D added without worrying about a seventh. And it makes a different sound. C9, C-Add-9. Sounds maybe simpler, more open. C9, C-Add-9. Sounds more open, brighter, maybe more folky or pop. A C9 sounds more jazzy, more dissonance. It's that seventh in the chord that creates that dissonance more than the ninth note. The ninth itself, you could see, with the C-Add-9, doesn't sound that dissonant. So tell me the next part of that question.
So the next part of that question, and you kind of answered the, like, how do you know? You can hear the difference. But the next part is from someone who's live and says, why play a C-Add-9 in place of a C?
For a couple of reasons. One, in modern pop music, the C-Add-9 is used a lot, and it sounds more like modern pop music than the regular folk style C chord. I usually call this, for that reason, a folk style C, a regular C. I call it a folk style C because it's used more in folk, country, older styles of music, even kind of acoustic rock and roll kind of stuff. But the C-Add-9 sounds more like what you hear in modern pop music. There's a couple versions of C-Add-9, so this one is a kind of I would call it a milder one. It's not that obvious. It's not that much different from a C. It just has that one note added right there with the third finger.
Yeah.
For beginners, I often teach a C-Add-9 instead of a C because it's easier to get running with going from a C to these three chords, which are common chords to start off. You can play a lot of songs with just the three chords. So it's easier than switching your whole hand around to a C. And it's consistent with the sound of modern music. If you're playing a lot of old folk songs or country songs, you probably should get to this folk style C, which, it's good to learn both, but the folk style C is going to be used more often.
Yeah. That's a good question. Okay, before we go to Shulamit's last couple of questions, I did just want to address one live question. Can you tell me if it's okay to place a guitar like down without a stand? My tip is always to either have your guitar in a case or a stand, just kind of like laying it on the floor. You can tip it over and it can fall and get damaged. But do you have any opinions on that, Thomas?
Yeah, don't lean your guitar this way against the wall. Over time, that depending on a variety of factors, but it could damage the neck. You're putting pressure on the neck in a way that I wouldn't do that, especially with a good guitar. I don't care about my cheap guitars, but a good guitar. Yeah, cheap guitars, I'll throw them on the floor. I don't care.
Yeah.
But a good guitar, I would put it in the stand so it's not putting pressure on the neck that way. The other thing is, too, I've more than once, I've damaged so many guitars in my life. Just really silly. So I try to, even on the stand though, the other day, this was a while ago now, but it really bothered me. I had the guitar on a stand, like you're supposed to, in a kind of corner room, and it was like this, I don't know if you ever played that game Mousetrap, something on a cabinet. I bumped the cabinet, it knocked one thing over, knocked another thing over, the thing fell off the cabinet and landed on the face of my guitar and put a dent in it. A good guitar. I'm talking, really a nice guitar.
Yeah.
It would cost me hundreds of dollars to get that dent out. Maybe $500 really to do it right. Yeah. So I didn't.
I was also just going to mention behind you have a wall mount. I love those things too. On your left, wall stand, like a wall mount is a great idea. Guitar stand or a case. That's what I would recommend.
I don't like putting my good guitars in cases. I mean, my guitars that I use, because it's too much hassle to get it out of the case. I want it where I can get at it and play right away. It's just that little hesitancy. If it's in the case, I got to pull it out. Maybe I'll get to it later. Yeah,
exactly. That's a good question though. Okay, so Shulamit had two more questions. So the first one is, I'll ask this one because this was one that was live and relevant to chords that we were talking about. What would you do with a song that the chords were, and then she gave a list of the chords. So A flat minor, E-add-9, F sharp, E flat 9, C sharp minor. Actually, Shulamit, if you can clarify, what do you mean? What would you do with a song with those chords?
I would make exactly a paper airplane and throw it in the air. No.
What's the question? Like, do you mean how do you transition between them, or like elaborate? Let me get to.
It depends on what your issue is. I mean, are you saying you don't know these chords, or you know them and you're trying to decide what strum to play them with, or
Yeah.
If you don't know the chords, are you asking how do you learn these chords?
Yeah. Okay, so while you're clarifying, Shulamit says, should I transpose them? No. I'm just looking at the chords. I can tell you it's like A flat minor, E-add-9, F sharp, E flat minor, C sharp minor. I mean, you could do a capo, right, and move everything up a half step, but
why?
I don't know. I would just learn the chords.
It wouldn't make it easier to play. Sometimes I will look at chords and see if I can make it so that they're easier chords, but you'd have to experiment. I mean, it's a A flat 9, you'd have to drop everything on half step. Now you've got an E flat. I don't know if that's any. You might get A minor. That's easier than A flat minor. But now you've got a E flat, add 9.
Exactly.
And the F sharp goes to F. E would go to D minor. That'd be cool. And C would go to C. If you went a half step down, I think you only have one chord that would be something you'd have to figure out. The E flat, add 9.
Yeah. Or you can just challenge yourself and learn some new chords. If you're ready, or I think there's a variety of things that you can do to make it easier or kind of change. Yeah. Let's go to a couple more live questions. So Gary says, any tips for moving from strumming to picking the acoustic guitar?
Strumming? Say it again.
Do you have any tips for moving from strumming to picking acoustic? And Gary, if you're live, do you mean like finger style, or because I feel like they're two different things, strumming and finger style.
Yeah, that's why I asked you to say it. It's not really moving. You're learning to finger pick. I think that's what you're trying to say.
Yeah.
Whether or not you're strumming on the guitar doesn't affect your right hand finger picking. You're learning to finger pick. if you're strumming, at least you know the chords. That's a good start. And I often, when people are learning fingerpick, unless there's other good reasons, I'll start them with some basic chord strumming just so they can learn the chords and then work on the right hand. The main thing I would say about fingerpicking is, well, two things I'm going to say. One is get the basic fingerpicking technique proper before you start doing a bunch of fancy patterns. I've seen so many people try to learn Dust in the Wind. They've never done fingerpicking, and they're tensing up and clawing at the strings and creating habits that, I mean, we spend months trying to undo those habits and go back to the beginning, and some of them just say, forget it, because I already can play parts of Dust in the Wind. I don't want to go back to basics. Just start with good, simple fingerpicking. Relax the hand. Learn to get the fingers in the right place. Do simpler songs, and then progressively move it up. And a good way to do that is in a course, a fingerpicking course. I highly recommend my fingerpicking magic course, part of Real Guitar Success, but there are a lot of good courses. Just make sure they're progressive. They're not jumping you into complex songs that you're going to tense up and try to, get your brain around where to put your fingers, and you still don't have a good basic technique.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be my tips on that too. Okay. And Sharon says, is it harmful for the guitar to leave your capo on at the nut, or should I take it off entirely after playing? I would just take it off. I clamp it on the headstock is what I would do.
I usually take it off too, but I never really thought that hard about it. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's damaging. Well, I've never heard of anyone storing the capo like on the nut, like this right here, right? I would like just clip it on this way. Like, 'cause she said, like, should I just like store it at the nut? I probably wouldn't store it there. I would clip it on up here. That's just me though. Or just take it off and put it in the same place every time, your case or wherever.
Yeah, I usually just take it off, and if I'm in the room, I'll put it here on the table, or I'll stick it in my case in the little compartment.
Yeah. Larry says, I'm getting older. My fingers are getting stiff. My pinky gets locked up. How can I help loosening those up?
And the pinky on the left hand?
I would assume so. If you're here, Larry, you can clarify, but I would assume pinky on the left hand.
I would do the stretching exercises that I recommend all students to do, and I have quite a few detailed lessons in Real Guitar Success, but I've created some free lessons on the blog too for them.
Yeah.
Stretching is good. And then the variety of, depending on your level of warm-up exercises, I would do them every day. And one for you with a pinky would be something like this. Goes like this. It's a simple exercise. You can go faster, but the point is to practice getting your finger in the right place and to practice going it evenly in time. Now, a step up from that is leave the fingers down and move over one finger at a time. This is a good exercise. It's called the spider. See what I'm doing? I'm moving one finger over at a time. Usually when people are learning this exercise, if you haven't learned it yet, you do it without a pick and just practice moving the fingers. It's a great exercise to get good finger movement. But all that while, you're going to be working at getting your finger, your pinky, in the right position. And that's part of the issue. You're doing something like this. That's why it's locking up. And mine will lock up too if I do that. It needs to be a good angle bent, and it stays that way. Watch my pinky. It stays that way. It doesn't lock up because I don't go out like that. And that takes practice to get it right.
Definitely. Yeah, good. That's a good tip. Okay, so Shulamit's last question, and this is actually last call for questions. If you guys have any other quick questions, throw them in the chat now. Shulamit's last question is, I was trying to practice a fingerstyle song that has 4 pages, found that they were flying off the table. I'm sure there's a solution. How do you play a song that has several pages without having to stop and change the page or have pages flying all over the place? Is there a special stand or what?
That means you're a real musician.
That's
we
right.
all deal with that.
We've all been there.
We've all dealt with that.
Yeah.
So, first of all, they do have orchestra strands, which are really wide, and you can put a lot of music on there. And then they make clips. A lot of people use clothespins. I was brought up with people using clothespins around the stand to hold it. Tomas, somebody we work with, showed me the other day. He took duct tape and tore it in little pieces and taped it on. I'm going to do that. That worked better than anything I've seen. But you got to have a flat enough surface to do that. If a table is good for you, take duct tape. I don't use. I think duct tape was better because it doesn't leave stuff when you.
Or painter's tape. Painter's tape.
Painter's
The blue
tape.
Yeah.
We actually grabbed some. What do you call that stuff that they put on the floor for theater? It's a type of tape. It's deliberately when you pull it up, it doesn't leave a bunch of tacky stuff.
Yeah, I know what you're talking
Gaffer's
about.
tape. Gaffer's tape.
Yeah.
Gaffer's tape. But I think painter's tape is probably great because it's very accessible.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
just
that's a
little
good way to do
pieces
it.
and tape down the corners.
Yeah. What
I
we
think
used to do in band. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
That's exactly what I'm going to do from now on. I'm going to get some tape.
That's a way to do it. What I do, what we used to do for like band, like school band, is this say, look, because we would have like 3 or 4 pages, you just like tape the 3 pages together. So like you'll have page 1, tape it next to page 2 and page 3, and then put it on your music stand, and then you just flip it. Or you can do the tape trick. If you have like 6 pages, you can do 3 and then the other 3 and tape them on the bottom of the stand or whatever. But I would recommend using a music stand. I'm curious, like whenever I have students that aren't using a stand, they're using a table. I'm always curious about their posture, right? Because if your music is sitting flat on a table, it's likely that you're not sitting in the best position for your body
doing
to
this.
play.
That would get me. That would get me.
Yeah.
I need my stuff up here, otherwise I'm going to be doing this, and I've already had enough problems with my back.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, to me, it sounds like it's raffle time. Let's get this
Cool.
going.
Okay. So again, it's people who have joined since. Each month we do a raffle, the Real Guitar Live, and these are for people who are part of my Real Guitar Success program. They enter by completing 20 sessions, 1 a day for a month, and completing just means spend 10 minutes on it and check it off. You can spend more time, but that's enough to complete your obligation for the raffle. We throw them in a raffle, and then we pick somebody for a $50 Amazon gift card. And I'm going to pick no, that's my napkin for my coffee. Let's try that again. Larry. Is it Larry Griffith? Are you on the call, Larry?
Is that Larry that we
Griffith?
were talking to earlier?
I know there was a Larry, but anyway, Larry Griffith, you get the $50 Amazon gift card, and I'd be happy to send that to you. And
very cool.
Everybody who's entered the drawing is a winner because you're that much better on guitar, and that's certainly worth more than a $50 gift card. But it's nice to have fun, something tangible to work for as well.
Absolutely. I think that's it for the month of August.
We'll be back next month, the first Thursday of the month, same time, and I hope you will be too.
Yeah, we'll see you guys soon.
Thanks for joining us. And thank you, Abm-Eadd, for being here.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me, as always. Y'all have a great rest of your August.
By the way, I'll put notes up. It'll take me, I think it's just a day or 2 to get these notes up. And any links that I talked about and a few extra I didn't talk about, I'll throw in the notes. I got a lesson on diminished chords already. It's going to go up there. And I'm thinking a few more notes. So check the notes for this if you would like some additional help. And if you're watching this pre-recorded, feel free to add more questions in the comments. I'd be happy to get back to you.
Good
Bye
stuff.
for now.
Bye, everybody.